what I want to do now before we can offer you, and this is thanks to the Villa Aurora 2, a snack, and there you can also continue a little bit the discussion. I want to take the chance to say some closing remarks, and Victoria will say something too. So first of all, I thank all the attendees and the speakers, and I'm really amazed that this program turned out to be even so much better than we ever imagined, I have to say. I mean, we thought it would be pretty good, but actually, as it came together, it was fabulous, or is fabulous, I have to say. I want to just do a quick summary what I kind of gained from all the discussions and all the contributions. And since some of the questions we got from the press or the radio was it a genocide and why is that? So when we just look at the Convention of the United Nations of 1948, all of the elements necessary for a genocide, we actually are present in Guatemala, and we talked about them in detail in the different contributions of the speaker. We talked about intent and purpose. We talked about systematic killing. We talked about the abduction of children, which is one part of the convention. We talked about the cutting of the reproduction line, which is violence against women, or killing women. We talked about, as mentioned already, sexual violence. And I would add, actually, beyond the convention, when we look at the first definition by Lemkin, we should also add linguistic violence as form as a race of racism, which is very important because it's a kind of an attack onto the identity of people. So I would add this too. So to all the elements are fulfilled in the Guatemalan case, and there is no doubt that we can establish this case. Yeah? That's what I just wanted to really, I mean, for most of us this is clear, but for the public it's not that clear, and many don't even know that there was a genocide in Guatemala. The second I wanted to mention, I thought also it was important, there needs to be, I think, future kind of investigation. Thank you, Emilio. So there needs, I think, several times it came up that there are larger frameworks for the mass violence in Guatemala. One of which was anti-communism, but also we talked about capitalism. And so I think these frameworks need also to be more considered when going beyond just looking at the facts of violence and systematic violence, to look also more about the interest involved actually. And we didn't speak so much at this conference about the interest, and I think that maybe then the next step for another conference, and I just wanted to share with you, I was asked several times, when will be the next conference? And then I wanted to say, because we had an emphasis on resistance, I think this was, for me especially, I appreciated this a lot, since I'm very much interested, my center is very much interested in the topic of resistance, so I appreciated a lot the different inputs on this topic. And just to kind of name these, so we talked about villages in hiding, we talked about escape and flight, we talked about joining the guerrilla, or today supporting the guerrilla. We talked about survive. We talked about desertion from the army. We talked about self-organization, which I think is a very important point. We talked about help from refugees in themselves, but also from organizations outside of Guatemala. We talked about student resistance. We talked about the post-genocide resistance, like the battle against denial, about art as a form of resistance, about giving testimony as resistance in trials, or also for the Shoah Foundation. Yeah. And I think this is important because this is a very big part of the resistance is claiming the memory. Yeah, and claiming the individual memory, but also to claiming the collective memory. And I think that's is very important because this is not just an act of restitution; it is also an act of recognition. And I think this is very important. And the last point is we talked a little bit, kind of in passing, about restitution or what is the other word? Reparations. And I think this is also a topic for the future. And it just came up yesterday where I thought, since I'm a Holocaust scholar, I was struck by the fact that if you think about all the careers and let's say all the property which was lost, which is actually, it has to be re-established. But even if you think about the topic of the students who couldn't finish their degrees. And in Germany, for example, there are now efforts to allow 90-year-old Holocaust survivors to finish their degrees. So this is a form of also recognition and restitution, which I think is, we should also kind of apply to Guatemala. And the last point I want to make is, there was a question which I found very important: when does genocide end? Does it end with justice? Does it end with recognition of the victims? Does it end with reconciliation? Does it end with, let's say, healing for yourself as an individual? Or does it end with healing for a collective? I think these are also things we have to think about in the future. And I think that's my wrap up. I want to, for my part, I have to thank very much my staff, Shefali, Martha, and Emily. I want to thank the translation, our co-sponsors, and also the Villa Aurora. And then a shameless act of promotion. I hope that you got interested in the collection of testimonies from Guatemala, that you might consider work with these as a resource. So feel free to apply for fellowships if they kind of fit your kind of where you are in life, or just consider to come to visit us. You can also do it online. So just keep in contact with the center. I think this is enriching us, and maybe we can support you also in the future. And now I hand over to Victoria, which I have to thank especially because without her, I think this could have never happened in the way it did, and I'm really grateful.
I'm actually going to sit down, which I almost never do when I'm speaking, but I'm really tired, so I'm going to sit down. So I thank Wolf tremendously because this conference was his idea, and we're all here because of his efforts, and I'm so appreciative, as I know everyone here is. So and I mean, all the presentations and the conversations have been so amazing, and I've been taking notes and notes and notes, as I think most everyone here has, and I'm not going to really try to summarize anything. I do want to just say again, I know, Ricardo, we are so happy that you're here, and it's really difficult actually for me to talk about it, but one of the things I think for many of us here, and we were so happy that you're here, is that I remember when the Truth Commission, the CEACHI, was debating whether they were going to use the term genocide. And one of my colleagues who had worked in communities before and was in the final writing of that report, he made the argument that there was genocide, and he cited your work as the first work, saying that there was genocide. He cited Ward Churchill, and he cited me, that your work was the work that established that there was genocide. And let's not so that was fun. Wolf and I were so determined that we wanted you here, and so amazingly grateful that you spent the days that we were here working to get your visa from the U.S. Embassy and flew in and got here at like 1 in the morning last night, and we're here first thing and ready to speak. So it's been 32 years, but you helped to establish that, and now there are all of these other people working on the genocide, and it's recognized, and these young scholars who are here. It was so beautiful, and Wolf, who really curated the program, and several people, Heather has mentioned that to me, Wolf really came up with the organization and theme, and I think in the end your presenting today ended up working out perfectly as well. I mean, it was just kind of the perfect end, and Emilio and Betsabe speaking. So I just wanted to say, I mean, one of the things I was thinking about when you were speaking about the Sequeires is we think about resistance, but I also think about peacemaking and peace building and truth telling and what that means. And it's an honor to accompany the communities in their processes. And the Sequeires were communities of populations of resistance, but they were also the kernels of peacemaking in the midst of war, where people built community and they maintained those communities and continue to build peace. And so instead of sort of continuing on the many notes that I have on that, because we've run for so long, I want to move to where Wolf was sort of heading at the end of his beautiful summary of the many different ways that we talked about genocide, and that is what the next steps are. So I have a list of next steps that different people have suggested over the conference. So I just want to share these with you. One is that, is there going to be an edited volume? Is there going to be a journal that's edited that has these pieces? What are you going to do? Is it going to be expanded beyond the conference? Is it going to go here? We don't know, but these are things we're thinking about. Other people have said, well, what about doing some kind of book series? There's so many themes here. How could you put all the themes in one? They could be small, short books. If you do books, then are you going to do it in English? You're going to do it in Spanish. It should be in both languages. So people want things in English, but they want it in Spanish, and they want it to go to Guatemala. And they don't just want it to go to Guatemala City. They want it to go up to the communities that were affected. Okay, so there's like a wide range, like a whole process of project. And then another that's like more immediate and less, perhaps less labor intensive for Shoah, but that would immediately start moving this discussion that we've been having out into the larger public in the United States and in Guatemala and other parts of the world, in English and in Spanish, would be to set up a webpage dedicated to the theme of this conference, and that there's space for all the presenters to blog about what they spoke about, the exchanges or conversations that have been had, or these different themes. So
we can do easily.
that would be something very easy, right? It's like you got perk up and
If you
stuff.
volunteer
Yeah.
to blog, we put this on.
Fabulous. So anyone who wants to do that, then great. So that's an easy and immediate thing. Another issue is like the activist end of it, because almost everyone who's here, who's presented, is not only a scholar, but a public scholar, a public intellectual, someone who is an advocate or activist for human rights or for supporting the communities in Guatemala. And so there are different things that we can do as experts depending upon which country we find ourselves residing, or where we might find ourselves living. One is doing peritajes, right, as Marta has done. Marta and others here have done as well, peritajes, also in immigration cases. I did one at 6:30 this morning, which is why I'm really tired, because I got up really early to testify on the phone, and the woman did get asylum, so it was completely worth it. But these kinds of peritajes, there are requests that are made all the time. So if anyone here is willing to do a peritaje on a Guatemalan asylum claim, please tell me and Deborah Rodman and Joe Murray Burt, because we all get requests, and probably others of you do as well, that anyone here who wants to do these peritajes, there are so many immigration cases that need them. And the other is a movement to have more alien tort cases like have been done on the Salvadoran cases, to get those moving on Guatemala, to help support lawyers who are collecting information about that. And any names that anyone has of officials, whether they're Army officials, police officials, any names you have of people who were involved in human rights violations in Guatemala who you think might be in the United States, those names are really useful. They need to be made public because those people, if they're residing in the United States, they're doing so illegally and they can be stripped of their citizenship. And they can be deported, as they have been and more will be, because war criminals don't deserve to live freely anywhere, and we want to deport them, we want them jailed, and we want them jailed in Guatemala. And so that was the part. Thank you.
I forgot one thing. I especially want to thank Rosalina to you for the keynote.
Yes.
That's important. And not just for the keynote, but all the contributions she had, and everybody who also contributed to the discussion, to the work. Also Freddie Pacciarelli for his work. So, and here's the director again, the Villa Aurora, for hosting us in such a great. I hope to see you all soon.